Okay, anybody in the audience wish to come forward, please state your name and address.
Jacob Aguirre, 612 Shelby Lane, New York, Park. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, viewing audience, Mr. President.
That sounds good.
Good evening. I had a talk with Mr. Spagnoletti earlier. The first one here for him. And he said it would be a zero cost if you folks vote change the date from April to November. Would you confirm that, Mr. Spagnoletti?
There would be, if the election were moved, there would be no cost to the district. That is correct.
The Board of Education?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Kathy Panetta, 108 Berlin Street, Roselle Park, New Jersey. For those of you who don't know, I'm a former board member, and I know how difficult your task is for leaders. I just think that you've been given a golden opportunity this evening, to be honest with you, because there's very seldom a time in your tenure that you'll have an opportunity to make, I think, such a change that is going to be beneficial financially for the district. I think as a board member, the worst thing you can do is to come in with a preconceived idea and not be open to change of any kind, just because this is the way it's been. And I think I credit myself to maybe always listening to what the other board members said and what the members of the community have to say. And it's not often you get a chance to save the district some money, and this is a really wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I hope you all take it very seriously, because I think as a community we do. And I know budgets are such an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I know that the community, myself as a member of the community, I trust when you put forth a budget, that it's a budget that has been streamlined, it's a budget that has been reviewed, and it's a budget you can all live with. And as long as you're 2% under cap, you're going to do fine, and I would totally support it. So I just want you all to know that you have my support, my household support, and I hope this is something that you all take seriously and that you vote on in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Saul Pierce, 150 Bourbon Street. I guess just some questions and clarifications. Regarding the new legislation, is it correct that both the board and the municipality do not have to pass a resolution, that only, if one passes, that becomes the, I guess, the governing authority?
Yes, yes.
So I guess the question is, when I slated it, I saw that there was a meeting for Thursday.
Yes.
So what was the purpose of that? Just curiosity.
A lot of this has to do with timing, so as you know, anytime a special meeting is going to be held, you have to have 48 hours notice. So, in discussion with the town, as you know, both the town or the Board of Education can pass this resolution. So the town is going to be bringing it up for discussion on Thursday, and they reached out to the Board of Education and said it would be a good idea to have a joint presence in terms of this particular issue, as opposed to either or approving it. Let's both, act one way or the other. The board, in fairness to them, didn't have a chance to discuss that, so the first thing the board wanted to do this evening was to have the opportunity to consider that, to hear any comments from the people, and to have dialogue with themselves. However, you do 48 hours from today, that puts me at Thursday, so regardless of the discussion, I still have to advertise for the special meeting. Otherwise, if the board decides to come along and support this, it would be illegal. So that's why, correct. So some people may view that as a fait accompli, but the actual, but the law says I must advertise and I must give due notice. So that's why it says joint meeting to consider. Nothing is concluded yet, but that's just how the timing of everything worked out.
And then I guess, in addition, there's a deadline for the 17th of
February 17th.
That's where it has to be done. In other words, to take effect this year.
Correct.
Yes.
And I was actually doing research, and there was a part of it that said that although a lot of the things wouldn't be charged to the board or the school district, it said that, excuse me, it does state that a school board would be responsible for any increased costs incurred
Correct,
only by
excessive
the
cost.
county board.
Right.
don't know what that
In the
means.
unlikely event that you had special circumstances with the election, for example, you had unusual polling places, or because you had so many board members that you had to create a separate ballot, you would have to bear that expense. But for 99% of the other districts, there is not going to be any additional expense.
Okay. And how will that affect the voting and passing of the budget? Will it still be in April? Will it be moved to the year? Will it?
Okay, in the event that this resolution is signed, and the budget is kept, the school budget is kept under the 2% tax levy cap, there is no vote on the budget. In the event the board chooses to go above the 2%, at that time, the temporary budget is struck at the 2% level. The excess is put on the November ballot as a separate question. If that passes, then that becomes the adjusted budget. If not, then that piece drops away and the temporary budget becomes the permanent budget.
And how will that work with the school year starting?
Budget cycle doesn't change.
Oh, okay, that was my question.
Budget
So budget cycle
cycle,
will-
correct. The nice thing is the budget cycle doesn't change. So what happens is in July, you will approve your budget at 2%. Either it'll be a temporary budget or it'll be a permanent budget. If
2%.
Correct. In November, if you pass the increase, then your budget will go up. So you have to live September, October, November without that extra 2%.
Okay. And then my other question was, are there any figures onto how much the board paid the municipality to hold board elections in April?
Okay, now you asked a question, but I think you want to know how much we paid total? Because there's three parts to that.
That's the three parts, isn't it?
Correct. We paid a total of $13,000, of which approximately $995 goes to the municipality.
And the others are paid by the board?
That goes to the Board of Elections, printing costs, we pay that,
Okay.
but that's who it gets paid to.
So that $995, all that $13,000 would be saved?
That no longer is an expense that we must pay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Denise Matarante, 310 East Clay Avenue. I have a question about, so you go with the temporary budget if this resolution were to pass. And then if something, well, if the amount goes over, and you said that goes up to vote. If that were to fail, is there any additional, that's it? I mean, it's whatever it is, so there's no additional cost?
Correct. So the lowest it could be would be 2%. That's correct. It cannot be cut below that.
Okay, so.
Whatever your 2% temporary budget automatically then becomes your permanent budget for that year.
Okay, so the way it is right now, if the budget fails and it goes to council and you had to pay, I mean, who pays those fees for the auditor and all of that stuff in that?
Oh, wow. Because there is an auditor that's hired, right, Ms. Grisha, when the budget fails?
Right, I mean, last time there was an auditor who had to
Mayor
go,
and council, the auditor, they hire.
Right, they pay that portion.
but that's an additional
That-
cost
that
to
is
the
an-
borough also?
That's correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
So if this were to go forward, or if this resolution were to pass, there would really be no cost to the borough at all?
Now, whether the budget passes or fails, there's no, right, because there is no audit, it just simply reverts back to the 2%, so there's no additional audit fees on the part of the town.
There's no appeals or anything.
There is no
Right,
appeal.
it's just
Just
what it
what it
is. So
is.
if it were, I mean, the 2% cap, it's kind of, it's what it was this past year, I believe, right? Is that?
Actually, this past year it
Was
was
zero,
zero.
right.
Correct.
So, it's really, and it's just, if for whatever reason the budget needed to go over it, the voters then have a say in it.
On the piece, only the overage,
Right,
correct.
okay, thank you. I actually, with that all being said, I think that I would love to see that you guys vote to have this move to November. It seems to me it's just a cost savings all the way around. Thank you.
Stacy Feschek, 229 Pershing Avenue. When I began working in Roselle Park about 14 years ago, I kept an eye on the things that were happening in this district. And 5 years ago, when I decided to move, I actually moved into Roselle Park because I was very happy with how fiscally responsible this town has been, how concerned they are with their citizens and their situations. And I'm very pleased to see again that this board is considering yet another measure that would save money for the taxpayers in Roselle Park. I think we have a good board with a lot of differing viewpoints that has the opportunity to discuss and compromise and negotiate. And I would put my trust in your decision, and I support the move of the election from April to November.
Anyone else?
Hi, Kathy McDonald, 320 Spruce Street. I just know all the work that goes into these April elections. From the board, I know that we have always worked, the Roselle Park Association, we have always worked with the board and with the citizens of Roselle Park to pass the budget, because I think the boards that we have had, I agree with Stacy, have always been fiscally responsible. I've never seen frivolous things happen. And I think putting our trust in the board to do the right thing, saving $13,000, I'm sitting here in a library and I'm thinking about the amounts of books that we can do. We were sitting at a meeting talking about possible equipment for special ed kids that would cost $195, and here we're looking at our pennies and nickels and all. And just to have that extra money that I think is just, first of all, I always thought it was ridiculous for any voting that we've had in Roselle Park, the number of polls that, voting places that we have. We have, what, 6, 7 of them all around. On Chestnut Street, there's 3 or 4 that day. So I think it is a lot of wasted money, and I do agree that if there is a need to go over, that we leave it up to the people in November. But I think in particular, the past 5 years, that we have had, some people just go out there to vote angrily. I want to say about 9 years ago, we had a 0% budget, 0 increase that was voted down, because people could just say no. They still will have that opportunity to say no, but in November when they're going out to vote. So I really hope the board does consider just taking the April election and, if needed, move it to November. But I really do trust that this board, as the boards in the past, will keep the budget as low as it possibly can be. So, thank you.
Anyone else? At this time, I'll close the public portion and I'll turn it over to the president. Well, we should run the discussion.
Any board members like to make comments? And
Yeah,
sorry for my delay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just very briefly, first of all, I do support the measure of moving the election to November. I think it's going to provide a better consensus. Because mainly at the April election, we sort of have the school community and maybe a little bit of the outside public. I mean, the percentage is quite low every year. And that's statewide that comes out to vote in April. I think in November, you'll get a better sense of the community as a whole coming out, with more voters coming out. The other thing about the, and also, I think the voting hours will be more convenient to the people, right? It's gonna be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's gonna be the regular voting hours. It's not gonna be what we set. We can't set those hours. It'll be from 6 to 8. The thing about the savings of 13, that's sort of a tenuous figure, because as more school boards support this measure, the percentage of cost could go up for us. So we could see it creeping up to almost $20,000 a year if we don't take up this measure. Is that correct?
Yeah, the way it works, my understanding in contact with the county business office is that all of the school districts share proportionately in the cost for the April elections. As each school district, and right now, as of today, all but 5, including Roselle Park, have indicated they are moving to the November election. 5 districts have already formally had their board meetings, Linden, Elizabeth, New Providence, Winfield, and Cranford. All the charter schools have made the move, and of the remaining 13 districts, only 5 have not indicated, one of which it was Roselle Park. So what that means is that out of the 26 school districts right now, only 5 are remaining in the April election. So all of the election costs would be split among the 5 districts. So that 13,000 would probably, it's best to look at that as a minimum amount that will, of a cost. That number will increase. Also keep in mind that Roselle Park is one of 7 communities in the county that requires both Spanish and English ballots. So that would continue. So, you know, unless all of those Spanish-speaking districts are still here, then we're going to bear the sole cost for the additional printing for the double printing of the ballots.
Thank you. All right, that's all.
Thank you. Anyone else?
With those costs, Mr. Spagnoletti, say there are 5 districts that remain, but wouldn't the cost be lower then if say the 5 said no and they split among them?
No, that's not correct, because whether you have 1, and again, this is my understanding I was also talking with the borough clerk, whether you have 1 district having their election in April or 20, you have to bring the full election board in for that day. They all have to get their salaries, they all get paid. Borough Hall gets the same amount, whether we have to pay, whether there's 100 districts or 1 district, so we pay that cost. The costs for printing the ballots, it's not the running of the paper, it's the setting up, it's the typesetting of all of those things that are cost prohibitive. So there really is, the bottom line is it is going to cost us more.
But, Mr. Spagnoletti, I do have one question on the guidelines put out by the, Department of Education.
Right.
They actually state that it may not be a $13,000 savings that we would recognize, because, you know, the reading is, the new law states that a school board would be responsible for any increased cost incurred by the County Board of Education. So so that we're all well aware, there's increased cost of moving this to November. So it's not gonna be 13,000, it's gonna be somewhere south of 13,000, the savings.
I would disagree with that. The increased costs are only, again, the interpretation is increase, first of all, it would be more than 13, because you know that there are going to be more districts moving to November than there will be in April. But again, the only increased costs were if your district is doing something out of the ordinary on election day that would require anything that we normally don't do now. We would still have election. We're not increasing the number of polls, we're not increasing the number of poll takers, county workers. We're not increasing the requirements on the Board of Elections. So as long as the municipality doesn't impose any restrictions, there are not to be any increased costs. Again, this is all brand new. We'll have to wait and see how it unfolds. But I think I'm confident that we will save at least $13,000 a year, simply because over half the county is moving to April, from April to November.
But I think the other thing with that is in there, if we put a second question on, if we put a question on the ballot to go over the 2%, that would probably come to the Board of Education to pay for that printing of that particular part of the setup, it might be. So the county wouldn't pick up that, so if you were the only district in there putting a question on,
It's not a second question, it's a ballot, right? For the extra 2%, it's difficult, right? It's a separate question, it's not a second question. So there's no, there is a distinction, there would be no cost, because you're still putting it on the November ballot. You're not putting anything on the April ballot. If you were gonna do, there are let's see if I can explain this. In addition to the 2% cap exclusion, if you want to go over that, there is something that's currently on the books called a separate question. 4 times a year, the state allows you to have separate elections. Most of the time, those are done if you want to have a referendum for a building plan. Those costs you absolutely would have to pay on your own. You'd have to pay for all printing election costs. That is not the same as exceeding the 2% cap. There will be no cost to the district if we go over. That's simply put on the November ballot, as is.
Yeah, it was explained last night. Last night, we went to a meeting last night, and one of the examples was if, we'll say transportation had to go up, Scott, help me with this, if the transportation went up, those are the numbers, you said that you could put that as a second question, would be in the November election, but the second it would be called a second question.
Okay.
Based on overage of, 2%.
Okay, what you're talking about now, I believe, are the different waivers and the different exclusions. I'm just talking about the strict 2% over cap for the budget.
No, I understand.
You're right. If you did anything, if you decided to do anything like that, there would be a cost. The only thing I would suggest to the board is that I think in the past 20 years, the only cap waiver we looked for, or the only separate question that we had, was for the building referendum.
No, right, I'm just saying, I'm
Right.
just trying to
Correct.
explain,
And that's
particular thing,
correct.
the county would
That
have
is
that
correct.
cost added to it, we'd have to pick up that extra
That's
cost for the
correct.
county, because the county says, I'm not gonna pay for
Correct.
one district or
That is
whatever.
correct. That is correct.
Did it say anywhere, will there be just one sample ballot mailed out?
For,
The November election, that would include everything?
no,
Just two?
Well, the way we understood it is that it's gotta be kinda out. You know,
One ballot, two sections.
two
Correct.
sections, you'll be
Right.
split down it, and then you'll have your, for office, government office, and then you would have, for the Board of Ed, on the second part of it, right?
Oh, but
I don't know what it looks like, but it'll be separate.
it wouldn't be like for the whole county, right? It would be tailored to each municipality.
Right, like it's tailored to your actual district.
Correct.
Right, you live in, but there would just be one, they're not gonna mail out two.
No, it's one ballot,
One
and then
ballot.
from wherever the section, either on the side or on the
Side or
bottom,
whatever it is,
it'll
right.
be non-party affiliated for the board members.
Yes.
Well, that was my concern. I mean, initially, and still, the idea of saving a great deal of money is appealing. But I also was thinking about some of the perhaps drawbacks. I mean, everything is not 100% wonderful. My concern was that, and maybe some of you, or anyone may perhaps in the audience there, could reassure me that this will not lead to the greater politicization of the election, with certain candidates, if running for the board, appearing on certain people's lawns, along with Democratic placards, and certain candidates appearing on Republican voters' lawns. Because one of the appealing things about this process, for me at least, when I first came on, was that it was a nonpartisan election. And I think ultimately this should be nonpartisan if we're all looking out for the interests of our kids, not necessarily our own political views. And I think that was a concern of mine. I was just hoping maybe some of you could you speak to that, if you've thought about that, any concerns you might have, or it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm sure if we had your assurance of members of council, certainly that it wouldn't become that. That would be more reassuring to me personally. Any thoughts?
I don't know how many people over the years have run. I can only remember back, what year was that? When we were here in the auditorium, we had 12 people running for 3 positions. That was the only time I ever saw anybody, other than maybe 4 people running for 3 positions. But
There
over
was
the
another
past
time there was
years-
about 8.
But about 8, that was the biggest one. I can't sit here and tell you that it's not gonna be any, if I wish I could. But I think the town of Roselle Park, my feelings for Roselle Park, I don't think that the political parties in Roselle Park are gonna go out and say that they wanna get this person in there because of what reason would they have? I can't believe that they would have any reason, or do I believe anybody running for the Board of Education has any agenda, okay, other than our children getting the best education they possibly could get. So I have to go on my 39 years in town here, being on council, being on the board prior, that I have to just think that Roselle Park is higher above that kind of, what's the word?
Politicization, partisan.
Whatever. You can't say the words, you just go whatever. But I really can't. I just have a difficult time believing that Roselle Park would become a political And I just don't believe it. So that's only for me saying it too, that's my heart coming out to you, telling you about what the town I feel is over 39 years being here.
Well, I think though, we need to possibly as a board, encourage people and let them know that that's not what the board wants either. Because I do think a drawback is you have to make a decision in June if you want to run in November. I mean, it used to be the end of January.
Well, it was.
Or February?
End of February.
End of February. And notoriously, people come in the last day, about 5 minutes before the start. Like, so to make that decision in June, it's, you know, hopefully people will realize that. Because if you decide in September, oh, maybe I want to get involved with the board, I guess it's too late, is that?
That's it.
My reading of the rule says that they have to declare the candidacy by the time of the June primaries are set.
Yes.
I wonder why they picked that date. Are we putting something on?
Well, I guess that's when all the candidates have to declare for the November election, so they're treating them the same.
Same venue.
So that is a concern. I mean, I'm a little concerned. So I don't know if that I would have ran in November, kind of. I might have shied away. So maybe as a board, we have to encourage people.
Yeah, I really agree with what Lauren was saying, and it's gonna get as political as you want it to get. I think, you know, people just have to realize that, and if we find out that that's happening in 4 years, we can decide to go back. So I think we should at least try it and see, you know, how it works, and I agree with Lauren, in this town, I really don't, I would hope that people would have the children as their first priority. And I've seen that, I mean, I've been through like 40, at least 40 board elections and budgets. So, you know, and I have to say that this board has been very responsible about keeping the costs down. And, you know, and if we can continue that, I think that's great, and have a good working relationship with both the town council and with our teachers association. You know, that's what we need to do, is to work together. And I think that's what we've been striving for. So I definitely would want to go in November.
Scott, you know, I hear what you're saying, and I actually have those same concerns. And I don't know that I feel as confident as Mr. Harms and Mrs. Sokol. You know, I do think that, you know, this is good for a lot of reasons. Moving it to November from a political or partisan is a drawback. Have to declare it in the summertime, there's gonna be other things that are going on in June. You won't have necessarily people's attention to run. And if that pool gets small of board candidates, for November, there's even greater opportunity that it becomes a political election as opposed to what it is now. You know, citizens of the town running, you know, and as a board, we have responsibilities to the children and the taxpayers of the town, and we want to make sure that in both cases, that we're representing them without influence, right? I don't know I can't sit here, you know, and say that's not gonna happen. That's naive in my mind to say that. It will happen, whether it happens now, 4 years from now, or 6 years from now. You know, one of my other thoughts on this too is that as of 5:30 when I left the house tonight, only 24% of the school boards across New Jersey,
136. I think I was said last time, 106 or 7.
Yeah, I think they're up to 138
Oh,
today,
okay.
have adopted it. We have the option as a board to take it up next year. And though I understand we would be in for $13,000 plus this year, you know, sort of not hastily go into something that may have drawbacks. It is budgeted for this year. We can cover our cost as a school district for this year. And see what happens in the towns that do take the plunge. You know, there's been examples in the past where we've, as a district, have acted on legislation, and not necessarily had to do it right off the bat. And I'm thinking back to the Coors Line era. So, you know, in my opinion, we can wait a year, see what happens, and then we can take it up next year.
I'm not sure if we have the right, and I could be wrong, maybe the superintendent can help me with this, or Sue. If our borough council takes up a resolution to move the elections from April to November, we do not have a choice. We don't hold it until next year. So with that said, I believe that we should work with the council, as both parties on the Board of Education and the town council are here to do one thing. The Board of Education is for our residents to keep the school, but give their children a great education, and the Borough Council to run our community the best way they possibly can at the least amount of cost. So working together, but again, if in fact on Thursday that council is going to pass this resolution, we really don't have, is any input on that? Is that true, not true, true?
As we said before, either party can pass, if they pass it, becomes binding for 4 years.
And I did also ask last night, one of the instructors on, Troy, you asked the other night about, after 4 years, who has the right to bring it back? Well, the instructor really didn't know. She said, maybe your attorney might know on that answer, and I says, well, I'll ask tonight. After 4 years, if the board says, no, we want to go back to April, do we have to get anybody's approval other than the Board of Education electing to go back and coming up with a resolution to go back into April?
I don't know that the legislatures thought that piece out. So.
My understanding is that the board can simply pass a resolution. However, you need to understand that, and that this is why it's really important to be on the same page with your town council. If you do that, there is nothing, as of right now, preventing the legislation from saying, okay, the following year, the town council passes a resolution to go back another 4 years, because it's every time they pass. Right, so you get a 1 year reprieve, and then a town council or the board could then go back, and then the next board can go back and pass that. So they haven't worked all of those details through. So that's the mechanism right now.
So it's important we work with the council.
That's the bottom line, is to work with council.
So, I guess with that being said, I guess I would want to understand, my understanding, if I will, of the legislation, where the spirit of it was for boards to take it up first, then municipalities or townships to take it up, and if, in the absence of either of those doing it, then the people have a right to petition a referendum. No, actually referendum it on the ballot. So in this case, we've kind of been, we're having a special meeting here tonight, called because the township or the municipality is stepping over and saying, we're gonna go ahead and do this, or wishing to discuss this matter without the board even having the opportunity to take it up at this point. So now, that's why we're here today. So I guess, I'm questioning, what is the motivation? What is the motivation for the municipality to be doing that at an earlier stage than I think we could have done? If I looked at the municipal calendar and our calendar, we still could have done it on February 16th. And that goes back to the concerns, and I'm not saying it's here at this present time, but how do you keep the politics out of the Board of Education? And, I'm concerned that 3 years from now, it may be slightly different.
I can't personally speak to the individual intent of each council member. What I can say is what I was told, and that is the borough clerk called me and said that the town council has received a copy of the legislation, and they are planning on discussing it at the February 2nd meeting, and would the Board of Education like to attend as a joint meeting to discuss and possibly take action on that. My answer was, anytime the town council extends an opportunity for a joint meeting on a decision that affects all of its members is a good thing. I recognize the fact that we hadn't discussed this, which is why we called a special meeting. I don't think anyone was looking to subvert anything. I think just because of the timelines involved, how town council's meeting fell, how our meeting falls. Granted, there's meeting, but again, in this business, what if there's a snowstorm on February 16th and you can't meet? So, and I'm sure the town council has a bunch of things on their plate. They want to get this out. From a school standpoint, the sooner we know what we're going to do, the sooner we can start making plans. So earlier for us is always a good thing, and I'm sure it's the same for council. So again, with that said, I can't speak any more to motivation, except that I'm sure that town council wants to save their residents as much money as they possibly can. And from working with council, and I know Lauren and Ro, you've been on boards that have been defeated. I feel comfortable in saying that I don't know one town council member or mayor that looks forward to having to sit down face to face with a superintendent and having to recommend cuts. Every mayor that I've sat with has said, please pass your budget. We don't want it here. We don't want to have to deal with that, because they know ultimately they're going to wind up looking, like the bad guys. They don't want it. That's absolutely the case. So, I think their intentions are noble, honorable. Can it be politicized? Anything can be politicized. We've seen that. I think what you've got to do is take a look at, as Scott said, there are positives and there are negative consequences to any decision you make. You have to do cost-benefit analysis and decide what you think is the best decision, given all the facts that you have at the time you have them.
Pat, I think the board's done a good job of describing the intangibles, things we're not gonna know, how politics will creep into it. But can we get one additional fact on the savings of the election, or the cost of the election if it were to be held in April? Do we know the county figure for the total cost of the election?
That we do not. I did put a call in to find out and to see, but they said that would actually take time to work out. They have to figure that out. So I do know that, again, our municipal piece is pretty constant. I think it's about $995, and that wouldn't change. That's the overtime that we pay the clerk and the assistant clerk to get the ballots at the end of the night, do the tabulations, and whatever else the municipality has to do.
So our share to the county right now is about 12,000 then?
That's 12,000, and the way I understand it, it's based on the number of polling locations that you have. So if you have, so I guess if you had the big districts that were staying, it would keep your increase down. But already, if you look, Elizabeth and Plainfield win. So, so now you're gonna have, that big piece was spread because they had more polling places. So that dollar amount is gonna kind of creep up a little bit. So my understanding is that for every 10 districts, and again, who knows, but your cost would double. So you're talking about, I think it's safe to say 25,000 would be probably a good ballpark figure.
So even if we stay in this year, we've only budgeted how much?
Well, we have 13,000 budgeted, so we would have to come up with at least another 13, but probably, again, no one knows any of this, but I think it's safe to say that you probably have to come up with about another, 12,000, 13,000 bucks.
And there are a lot of unknowns, and going with what Scott was saying, and what Troy was saying, about the politicizing and also some other intangibles and unknowns, it's a 4-year commitment, and, it may be great, and it may not be. We don't know that yet, and there are a lot of unknowns. I mean, I wish I had a sample ballot to look at. I mean, I wish Trenton would have, had their ducks lined up a little bit more so we have some concrete evidence, because we're going on a whim, and I mean, some things have been defined to us, and there's some questions I have as far as like, the excess budget, if it goes over 2%, and say the voters do apply that, do approve it, well then, what happens to September, October, and November? It's like, how do we take that money? Do we start it in December, the new programs? I mean, there are a lot of unknowns that we don't know about, and, if we make this decision, we have to abide by it for 4 years before we have any changes that can be made. So I'm saying, why rush? Like Troy was saying, give it a year. What happens with other districts? How does that play out? How does it work? I mean, because they'll be in it for 4, and we can always jump in next year as well. Yes, I understand about the cost and saving the town's costs, and I understand that concern, and I want to save us as much money as possible. But sometimes if we have to take one step back, take 3 or 4 steps forward, I'm fine with that. we have this option to implement the plan next year, and like I said, why not see how other districts fare? And, I think this would give us a much clearer picture to make a more informed decision, next year. Because, I know that there are election costs, but most importantly, one thing that I think about is, I'm not in favor of taking away the residents' right to vote on the budget, at or below 2% cap. Roselle Park residents need to be informed and involved in our budget process, and in my opinion, taking that vote away could drive a wedge between the taxpayers, Board of Ed, and the municipality, and possibly creating anger or also apathy. So, there may be a time in the future where going above the 2% cap is a necessity in order to provide, say, a new program, technology, something for our kids to make a difference for our children, and also to help continue our excellence of education in Roselle Park to go further. And if that goes to a vote, say we have to go 3% over, I want voters who are informed and willing to help us. Roselle Park residents need to be a part of this equation. So that's why I have some reservations about this.
We are going to involve them. We have put meetings out last year in every building and gave them step-by-step, telling them, and we got their input. We're not gonna stop doing that. We are still going to be doing that. And if we play the what-if game, the state could come back next year and say, well, you didn't want it, too bad, you're not gonna be able to do it now. I mean, they've done worse. So I don't know if we can really trust them to, say no right now. And will we really get a chance to do this at another time? And I think, like I said, I really think we are doing a lot to involve the town and people. And we are having our meetings here, open meetings at different buildings. We are going step by step through the budget. We're getting their input. We're publicizing whatever we need to do. I don't think they're going to be left out. I really don't. And, and if we could keep our budget down the way we did last year, I don't see that we're going to be really pushing 3%, as you were saying. I don't think we're going to be doing that.
I'm just saying that was just a
But that's,
hypothetical.
well,
in the
that's what I'm
future.
saying. There's too much what-ifs in that.
Well, and I think that's the position of the state by doing this, really encourages, strongly encourages districts not to go over 2%.
Right.
So that you don't have that additional vote, you don't have the chance of that going down. And I think that's really their way of strongly encouraging us not to go over 2%.
I think we will lose a little connectivity with the community with the budget, because if we still have to stick to the same schedule in the April time period to get in for the school year, but it isn't voted on until November, is the board ready to do a public sessions in the spring and again in the winter?
Why not?
To prep it for the, and will people be able to pay attention or care as much? I don't know. At least now, right or wrong, come April, there's a short span where we get to focus on the budget and vote on it.
But how many people came out to the meetings that we had last time, too? And even what Troy was saying is, we're having that small pool of people. What have we had now? I mean, we've had, Scott knows, we've had elections where there was nobody, that, we had to do write-in, so because, so I don't think that's gonna change, whether it's in June that you have to decide to do something, or in November. You're
Well,
still going to be able to get people, we could, and there's nothing to stop us from having another meeting right before the budget and reminding people what we did.
See, and this 2%, now it's state law, so it's like a hard cap for the municipality and the school board. The difference with the school board, we can always go above the 2% cap and still go to the voters in November. So moving the elections to November really doesn't take away the right of the electorate to vote on the budget.
Except for we've, as a district, held at 0%. The taxpayers of Roselle Park have held this board to a 0% over the last few years, at the end of the day, right? So automatically granting a 2%, does that mean this board is gonna hold at 0% next year, the year after that?
Troy, I don't know if that's an accurate statement to say that the taxpayers held the board to 0%.
They had the right, they had the right at because of the election, of voting on a budget in April. I understand that the board submitted a 0% budget. Let me rephrase.
Right.
The boards with the knowing that their April election on the budget, the board in doing their good job in good faith budgeting, came in at 0%. But we haven't,
So are you saying then that because automatically, that, I'm just trying to understand that there might be a temptation for the board not to do their due diligence and keep the board, for example, if they could still do 0%, they wouldn't do that because now they can automatically go to 2%?
I think anybody taking away the safeguard, and not necessarily this board, but, and that's an issue I do have with the blanket 2%, is if there is no safeguard, whether it be 3 years or 5 years, you start getting 2% every year, and it becomes the norm. So now the 2% annual is a 0% norm, and then you become where you're going for the second question every year. And maybe I did a poor job of.
No, I don't disagree with what you're saying, and in the beginning, when this first came out, I had the same thought about, okay, so now, any board across the state of New Jersey can go, okay, 2%, I'm happy, let me put 2% in there. When I talked to the superintendent and gave my feelings to him, because, you know, NGA, the New Jersey School Boards Association, wants to back this and all this other stuff, and we went last night, Scott and I were at this meeting last night, and, you know, every year we have to go through these different courses that you have to take to inspire yourself to do the 0% and the 2% type thing. You'll go to some of them, but one thing they said, and please bear with me a little bit, they said the most important thing you have to do, okay, especially with this thing here going in November, is you have to communicate with your residents. You have to keep them involved with it. Jim, what you just said before about, are we willing to it? Whether we're willing to or not, we have to.
I'm certainly willing. I think it'll be hard to keep the people's interest. We can barely get it to come out to an April election. What makes you think you'll have knowledgeable, informed voters?
Right. I don't mean that I was putting you down when you said that. I'm just saying, this is what they said last night, and I'm thinking here that, yes, we have to do that. We have to keep more involved now. I think it's the board's responsibility to keep more informed, because they don't have the right to vote for the budget unless we're going over it. Okay, and I felt kind of strong in that in the beginning, but I kind of weighed it out and said to myself, okay, if we do our due diligence, we keep it down as low as we possibly can, and if it comes out to 1% or 1.5% or 2%, well, so be it. But let's prove to them why we spent the 2%. Or the 1.5%. That's what we have to do. That's what I'm talking about, the communications that we have to do from now until, what we should be doing it all the time, whether it's 2% or we go to November or April, we still should be doing that no matter what we do. And that's what we have to continue to do. So with that, the other thing about the political part of this thing here, I think if it became political, I think it's every town, the residents of Roselle Park have the duty to come to this board, okay, instead of only having 3 or 4 people sitting in the audience, okay, or when we acknowledge our children, okay, and we allow them to leave, because we don't want our children sitting here listening to us babble on like I'm doing right now. But again, it's their duty, it's our duty to come in here, and if it gets political, to put them on notice, so that we're noticing this. We gotta stand up and start doing our damn job that we're supposed to be doing here. The townspeople also have to do the same thing.
I think we're both
Not just the Board
vigilant.
of
We're both
Education.
vigilant and watching over the next
Okay.
4 years. We have the
Okay.
option of going back, but it doesn't necessarily have to go that way, and I don't think it will. I just was concerned. I was just thinking about the possibilities, that's all.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you, because I can look at other districts and say, my gosh, it's gonna be political.
I've
I know
seen
it's gonna be.
instances where that happens.
You're already reading the paper
Slate of
today.
candidates or so.
In today's paper, one of the articles said in there about what's good and bad about this moving over.
Mm-hmm.
Politics, main thing. You'll see a sign, just like you said, you'll see a sign next to some person in some political party saying they're gonna have, and then they're gonna feel obligated to that particular, because they financed their campaign or whatever. But again, if that happens in Roselle Park, then I think the 13,000 people, or at least 1,000 people, gotta start coming to the Board of Education meetings and start telling us, hey, this is wrong. You can't do that.
It could be way too
It's
long.
their, and it's their town, it's their
That's what we
school.
want.
We just try to
Yes.
run it.
Troy, in addressing your concern about the automatic 2% increase, I feel that it's the responsibility of the board to question the administration. If the administration year after year just comes and says, all right, we want 2%, it's our responsibility, especially the finance committee, to look through and say why. Is there other ways you can cut? So I think that it's not just automatic, you go with 2%. That's our job, to make sure if we do go with 2%, it's legitimate.
Understood, the hammer's just not as hard, yeah.
Well, yes and no. Keep in mind that, again, the basic budget process stays the same, so the Board of Education has to approve a temporary budget. The other piece to this that we didn't mention is that Sue and I, the county requirements now for budget reporting are much more strenuous. Last week, Sue and I went to a mid-year budget review, and they have a list of probably about 30 indicators that tell us where, and they're called efficiencies, as to where we are above the state average, where we are below the state average, and regardless of whether or not you have 2% in your budget, if they say you can't spend more than this because you're spending above the state average, it doesn't matter. So that 2% isn't going to help you. As I told some of the board members, that there are some issues in Roselle Park that we will never be able to correct in terms of state spending. And I'll just give you one example, because it's an important one. It's something that this board has addressed, and we have a former board member here. She was on that lovely committee when we talked about grade level. I couldn't remember how to say it. Grade level buildings. We are over in administrative. Now, keep in mind, you do not have any supervisors. You have no department heads in curriculum. You have no director of special services, and you are still over in terms of administrative costs.
Right
Do you
now.
know why? Yes. Do you know why you're over?
5 schools.
You have 3 elementary schools in a 1 square mile town. So you need to have a principal in each of those schools. If you're going to have neighborhood schools, then you're going to have to tell me I have to go and fight every year to get that overlooked. And we have to pay that, because
Well, what is the state insisting on?
that
us
we
doing?
consolidate grade, then exactly, that they don't, the state, right, the state will say, fine, you wanna do this, then you do it at your own peril. You're not getting any extra money for this, you're not getting anything extra. So, back to Roseanne's point, though, I agree with Troy said, obviously, when you relax one layer of requirements, but I think the culture, at least for the past 9 years that I've been here in Roselle Park, is to try to preserve what we have. I think if you look at the volume of programs that we have, we're like the military, we're a little leaner, we're a little meaner, but there are things that we don't do anymore. We don't have middle school sports anymore. We don't have the WISE program anymore. We simply don't have the funds because we've had to make some hard choices. And I think that the board has done a fantastic job. And I'm confident that, as you said, that the town is going to keep our feet to the fire for the foreseeable future.
Any other comments? The one thing I would say about it being political, if I can remember back to when we had this slate of 15 people, that was a lot of years ago, and the auditorium here at the standing room only, literally, that's how it was. But I do remember that year there were slates of candidates running, and they did not win. So, like, it had gotten political, and the slates had.
What do you mean, Karens or?
Oh, yeah, there were like 3 people running together, they were in this group, and they did not win. It didn't sit well with the town. So, I mean, but like I said, it was standing room only. I think we were here at almost midnight on a candidates night. And if you've been to our candidates nights, I mean, I think I was at one candidate night, no one asked us a single question. It was like, okay, we can go home now, so. But they didn't win, because I guess it did sit well with the town. And hopefully, that's what would happen. If it got too political, people would see through and not want those candidates to be to run the school board. So. Anybody else, comments, questions, concerns?
No, I just wanted to ask, and I'm sorry to digress a little bit, about the state spending and administrative costs. Every year you go to the state to present the budget, correct?
Correct.
Right, now, every year the state proposes us to consolidate the elementary schools?
No, they don't tell you what to do. What they do is they tell you, because you have this configuration, you are over in this cost. That's correct. You are above the state average.
So what do? They just deduct?
Well, they want to know why, and you have to explain, otherwise they would deduct money from you. They would not
Alright.
approve that line item if you can't adequately justify why you are over in these areas.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But at this point in time, how would you consolidate schools? We don't have other than.
Well, let's get over this one.
Correct.
I've been done 15 years ago before the other one went.
No, please, please, please.
After my time.
Sorry, that's beyond the scope of this meeting.
Mr. Spagnoletti, if you could just clear up a point for me with this cap override referendum. So we have like a 2% budget, okay, and say we did a, like, you know, I don't know, a reserve, or what is it? We have the two budgets, one that we want to get voted on, say that's over the cap, say 2.5%.
If you decided you wanted to go over, let's say the board agreed that they wanted to go to 2.5%. What you would do is in April, when we normally adopt a budget, you adopt a temporary budget of 2%.
Okay.
What you would do then is that extra 0.5% would go on the November ballot. You would start the school year with 2%. In the event that the budget passes in November, then that additional amount would be credited to your budget, and that becomes your adjusted budget. In the event that that piece goes down, the 2% that you had to start the year with is all you have. So you're absolutely correct. You have to be careful in terms of the kinds of things that you want to go over with your budget. You certainly don't want to start a program or hire a staff member. You don't want to use that additional money for any recurring costs, because there is a possibility that you wouldn't get it. Most districts will use it for additional equipment purchases, supplies, materials, one-time costs. Because you're absolutely right. In November, if that goes down, you don't get that money, so you can't count on that.
So then we'd have to plan, say, if we did go over, I'm not saying we're going to, but if we did, say, we'd purchase that equipment in January, or if it was a hard needs.
Correct.
You'd have to go into it with a plan of what that money is.
Correct.
Right.
And again, you have
to
to
backload that.
And again, you even have, and again, the county superintendent has to approve that as well. You just can't go in and say, well, we're gonna go in with a 5%. You still have to justify to the county what this, and they're going to say, if you're putting this in for expanding math classes, they will not allow it, because they know that you're gonna have to start in September without any guarantee of this additional money.
So I think it puts the board on really doing, you know, due diligence on what they really wanna have in there for it. So again, and I think the feelings have to go out prior to the April, you know, in October, November, December. If the thought that the board wanted to do, I don't know, whatever, the feelings would have to go out to there and get kind of, put out another, questionnaire type thing, or a survey type thing, and this is what we wanna do. I mean, I think we'd have to do something of that sort.
Well, I think if you were gonna go over 2% for capital improvement, I mean, another way to look at it is a good thing. Now, instead of only having to try to convince the voters between February and April, now you have 6 months to build your case as to why you need to go over. So, right, you can say how many people would come, but it also gives you more time to, you know, fully, especially if you were going to, let's say you wanted to purchase a building, or you wanted to do a major equipment upgrade. There's a lot of different things you can do in 6 months as opposed to 6 weeks.
And I believe that sometime down the road, we're gonna have to, I mean, we're gonna have to catch up with the times. I just believe that our school district we're gonna have to. So again, you're right. Whether it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road, at some point, we're gonna have to bring our technology up. We're gonna have to do something. We all know that. And I think the townspeople would also know that too. But again, as Pat said, we have this extra 6 months to explain to the taxpayers of why we're doing this year and the benefits of it. I think we still have to start putting out all the positive things about what we do, not, you know, let them think of the negative things. Let's put out the positives, and, you know, before they come out with all the negatives to us. I just think that helps us to do it. I don't know.
Anyone else?
So, let me just confirm, the overage, over the cap, has to be specifically line item, it's specific, I'm gonna use earmark, I know it's not earmark, but, it's very specific.
We're gonna build a building,
Or we need maintenance on X, Y, Z, or, You know, because
Well, no,
my concern is, let me just finish for a second, Mr. Cox. My concern is, you're building a budget in February for adoption in April, or, I'm sorry, adoption in March, right? For turning it into the county. And you're almost talking 9, 10 months later, how do you foresee that far in the future? For specifics around maintenance of vehicle XYZ, it needs a.
By law, we have to do a comprehensive maintenance plan 5 years out. Every year, that has to be approved by the county. We have to do a technology plan. We are required to, all government bodies have to do long-range planning, and yeah, by the time you're out to the 5th year, it probably doesn't resemble exactly what it looked like, but it gives you mileposts to shoot for. We know, for example, 2 years out, that all students now are gonna have to take their New Jersey S test online. And they're telling us we have to start thinking about how we're going to effectuate that. I mean,
Could you just confirm, so the way it is now, if the budget gets voted down in April, it can be cut, but the borough, for instance, who's in charge of the final figure, can't tell the board where to cut?
As of right now, that's correct. The board can, legally, the town council can recommend a dollar amount, and they can make suggestions based on their audit. The board is not obliged to follow those recommendations.
So in November, is that still the case, or is it, you gotta say, where do we wanna spend this much more on this item?
No, the board,
No.
no, it's
The
just,
2% stays, whatever the excess is would be the one that is the.
no, but what he's saying is, let's say you donate, you said, no, see, those determinations, I think, are at the board level. The board, you're going to say that you had, I don't know, because, again, we haven't been there, but I can't imagine what the public would, let's say you said that you were going to redo the track, and you're gonna put AstroTurf down, and that's why you want this extra 0.5%. And you went out and you voted, and that went down, and you put AstroTurf in anyway, I think you'd be run out of town on a rail. Because then you're disingenuous. I don't know, because I haven't seen anything in the
Well,
legislation that
would be
speaks to that question.
for a second question, but not if you just wanna go about cap, you don't have to say what it's for explicitly.
No, but knowing the board,
Yeah.
I can't imagine you would
That would
get the
be part
town
of
to
the- part of
approve
the
that
change,
unless you
yeah.
tell them
I
why.
mean,
But it also-
we've shown transparency all
Absolutely.
along, so, we're not.
Well, I just wanna make it clear, it's
But
not,
legally,
that there's gonna
correct.
be books you're gonna get cut if you're gonna
That's
get
correct.
cut. We have to
Legally,
want to
no.
decide where
I
to
think
cut
morally,
that.
you'd be,
But I think you'd have to know, on the chance that it doesn't get passed, what you're not gonna do.
Of course, that's
So
why the
you
plan.
have to go in
plan
knowing
for
what
budget.
you're not gonna do.
I would love to. Yeah, but the thing is, your budget is gonna be still your budget with 2% cap. So you're gonna start in September with that 2%. Now, you're gonna hope, if you're gonna go over by any percent, 0.5%, 1%, that November, that the residents pass that. If they don't, no, town council doesn't get it, they don't cut anything, you go back to the budget that you had there with the 2% cap, or whatever it is, you just work with that. You don't get the turf field. That's it. I mean, that's what the whole thing. But, I mean, that's what it is. You don't get the turf field, or you don't get the new building put up, or whatever. Nothing more happens than that.
well, I
The
think
way I
that,
was explaining.
right, but to Jeff's question, legally, there is nothing stopping you right now from saying, if you advertise, here's your 2%, and again, to stick with that analogy, we wanna go an extra 0.5% because we wanna put a turf field. You're explaining to the public, but it's not broken out separately on the budget, they vote that down. There is nothing legally, at least that I'm aware of, that prevents you from saying, okay, instead, we're gonna cut 3 basic skills teachers so we can still have that turf field.
Oh, they said last night that, help me out. They said that you couldn't go back and cut something if it wasn't passed. You couldn't go back and take that budget and redo it, we'll say.
So then the
Okay,
answer.
if you had a budget here and you had,
So
the
if
teachers, you had 100 teachers, you can't go back
So
and say,
then, well, then-
okay, I want the turf field, so I'm gonna cut 3
So
teachers.
then what you're
No.
saying, Lauren, is then they are line items, because then that is line item, because that's
So that
how.
is a change then, if that's how it is.
That's why I understood it, I mean, we didn't get better clarification in my brain thinking last night, but.
What was explained,
I mean, what he's explaining, you could not go back and cut teachers or cut programs to satisfy your need for that 0.5%.
So then you have to
1% of that.
articulate what that extra percentage is gonna be used for. And if it doesn't get passed, that's the
That's
part
why
that
you're-
gets
That line
on.
item goes away.
So,
That's the way.
so then it's operating, so it sounds like now it is operating similar to a second question, in terms of how it
So
operates.
how do we get clarification? Will we even have clarification on that by the time we're asked to?
We can, I mean,
to
we can
vote.
have them check with the New Jersey Board Association, they're the ones that are coming out, or we can call the county and find out, right?
But I don't know that,
I don't know that the state knows, do they?
I don't think, well, there's a couple of things, right? The state doesn't know our exit plan,
Well,
you know, the exit plan in 4 years out. Not sure about how we have to articulate the overages. You know, I'm just concerned about.
I got a feeling that next year and the year after that, and the year after that, for the first 4 years, you're gonna see different changes coming here.
Well, it's gonna be every time Thursday.
That you allow this to happen, that if this in here doesn't have to be a specific line item, you go 0.5% or whatever, that's my feeling, because that's the way the state works. They come out with this thing, you throw it at you, okay, we're gonna
fine-tune
get it in and fine tune it as we go along, and we like it or we don't like it. I mean, the state's been like that, that's what it's here.
That's why I think after 4 years, you know, you get that opt-out, you know, you get,
Right, because you
if
find out
it's
that
not
you
working
screwed
the
up
way
and
you need it to work, you opt out.
Sure.
Point of order.
You wanna stand up and ask, please?
This discussion is supposed to be about the election from April to, changing from April to November. You guys are now talking about the budget process.
Well, it's a, I think because that's the implications, Jake, are what happens if you do it, but the discussion still is focusing on that, it's just, they're in the nitty-gritty now.
When are you folks going to make the decision on changing from April to November the election for the Board of Education?
There's a joint meeting on the 2nd, so if there is a question, the board will have an opportunity to vote. If the board chooses not to, and it gets complicated, Jake, let me explain. A couple scenarios. Scenario 1 would be that you have 5 members of a minimum 5 members that come to Thursday's meeting, in which case it's a quorum, in which case it's a joint meeting. The town council puts forth the resolution. Either party votes yes, or both parties vote yes, the resolution is passed. In the event that both parties vote no, then it would appear on the February 7th agenda, solely up to the board as to whether the board wants to pass that. I guess that's the logistics.
No decision is going to be.
Oh, no, so it was advertised, there is no action is being taken today.
It's just a discussion.
It's a heated one, but it's good. This is what you
It's
call
live.
democracy. Democracy.
This is nothing.
The budget is an enormous part of this, so that's why we have to discuss it.
Well, perhaps if you invite the general public for a buffet, they'll come.
That's against state rule.
You picking up the tab? We're saving money now, we're not spending.
You cooking?
I know a woman that cooks great.
Sign her up.
Thank you.
Does anyone else from the public have a question or comment?
I just have a comment. I like your discussion, so be very frank with you. When you talk about politicizing this, I was on the board for many years, and there were people who had agendas coming onto the board. They did not last. They did not last because the rest of the board stood up to them and did what they knew was right. The worst thing you can do is come out to a board of education and have preconceived ideas, any self-serving interest. Your job is to be here strictly for the children. I like your questions. I'm concerned about your apprehension to voting positive for this, because any change, there's an unknown. And just because there's an unknown doesn't mean it's not going to work out. I like the fact that there's a contingency in 4 years to opt out if it's something that isn't working. I see this as elongating the budget process, but I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that is being able to have the opportunity to get more information out to the community. I don't know if you've been involved with the budget process yet during the board, but it's very complicated. In 15 years, I'm not sure I still understand it. But I had enough confidence in the administration and with the information of the other board members to know that what was being presented was accurate. And if it does go over cap, you better hold these guys to it and say, why are you over cap? That's your job. And I appreciate the fact that you would question it. I truly do. But I don't want you to be so apprehensive as to not be open to the idea of a change. Because I think change is unfortunately necessary. Sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's not. And it's not, you can just back out. But I think any kind of a savings is needed, especially in a small district like this. And any monies that can be put towards any other programs, I am 100% behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
So here's in 150 Berlin Street. Ms. Panetta just brought something up and I had to leave, so pardon me if it was already discussed. If the change is made, what happens against that $2,000? Like, will it be put into, I guess, the reserve? Will it be remain unused? Will it be, has the board even considered that option of what to do with that? Since it's budgeted already. I don't know if it was answered, I'm sorry.
I'm not.
It all depends on costs that occur between now and June 30th. We don't have a crystal ball to see if any unexpected costs will arise. I mean, that is a good thing that that's $13,000 that we would not have to spend. Certainly, if that $13,000 was not spent by some unexpected thing, then it would go into excess surplus and would be applied to the future budget.
Okay. And then going forward, at least next year, again with the presumption or with the presumption that it is moved to November, will there be a line item that says elections and then 0 for 2012, 2013, 2012?
You mean at the budgetary, when we do the budget?
Correct. When you do next year, school year's budget, will there be a line item or will it be 13,000
If you were to
less?
look at our budget, which has several hundreds of line items, the cost of elections is in a particular account that has many other costs. So that particular line item should not increase. And I would be able to point that out
It
at
would
the time.
decrease.
It would decrease.
Yeah, increase.
There would
That's
still
all
be stuff
decrease.
there, it would just be
It
small.
Yeah.
would be the decrease of whatever that cost
Yes,
was.
Right, right.
Correct.
It's
And I
not
guess-
go, I guess my point was, it's not gonna go down to 0 because there's so many other costs there.
Because it's not punched in, but it's grouped with other
Other
expenses.
liability, legal.
So I guess that's something you can
costs.
put in your next year's budget presentation of
Yes.
13,000. And thank you very much for your time and your discussion.
Anyone else? Any other board members, comments, questions? If not,
Thank you all very much. I appreciate the discussion. For the board, there is advertised a joint meeting for Thursday. I certainly, for my part, will be in attendance. I encourage the Board of Education to participate. 7 o'clock. I believe it's going to be the first item of business according to the agenda that I received, a copy of the sample agenda. Also, Ms. Gershia, do you have a copy of the sample resolution?
Yes, I do.
Could you please, if you want, you can distribute that to the board members so you can take a look at what the resolution will be. And there are some extras here, we can give them out to the members of the public. There you go. Make some extras. Yeah, pass these extras. So, again, there was no action tonight. If, I ask any board members, if you have any additional questions or concerns, feel free to email or call myself. Otherwise, the next official board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, assuming that we have a quorum of at least 5 members. The meeting will take place. The next regularly scheduled board meeting for the Roselle Park Board of Education will be back here next Tuesday on February 7th, 6 o'clock for the closed meeting, 7 o'clock for public.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion?
Second.
Mr. Arms, second, Mr. Gallivan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.